father, not his grandfather, but I believe his great-grandfather would have, or his great-grandmother, one of them would have been black, and then everybody else in that chain that led to him would have been white. So it was a couple of generations removed, basically. He bought a train ticket on the whites-only car. He told people, in fact, that he was not white. He organized a lawsuit to challenge these segregated cars. And if you remember, the Supreme Court, the statement of law in this case from the 1890s was separate but equal. It was perfectly legal to separate the races as long as the accommodations were equal. So these train cars, same number of seats, same windows, same bathroom facilities, it was perfectly legal to separate because nobody was gaining an advantage or a disadvantage. And what you saw over the course of the next 50 or 60 years was that separate but equal was the statement of law, but ultimately separate but equal began to be separate but unequal. The facilities weren't going to be the same in a number of instances around the country, and this would lead to other cases. Anything else jump out from chapter 5? Go ahead.
Other groups' logos?
Don't worry about logos. Yeah, we didn't really deal with logos in this one. Don't worry about that one. I think maybe one or two of the classes we discussed a little bit about like the Washington NFL football team logo and maybe some coins, but I'll be honest with you, don't worry about that. This chapter has got a number of links in it. If you remember Tiger, Fuzzy, and the Collard Greens, what was Tiger, Fuzzy, and the Collard Greens?
He was being a dick.
Tiger Woods, the golf player, yes. And what was it that happened?
Fuzzy was like one of his competitors or something, and he was like, oh, what was Tiger that won like whatever the championship the year before?
The U.S. Open, I think. It was his first win.
They get to choose the food for the next.
They get to choose the opening dinner for the next year's tournament to kind of celebrate what they had just done. And what did Fuzzy say after Tiger won that tournament? He was salty about it.
Fried chicken and collard greens.
Tell him not to serve fried chicken or collard greens, whatever the hell they eat. And this was his exact wording, if you remember on this. And do you remember what article that this tied to? Oh, there's
coworkers bringing in food for people, right? They said
there was an article about coworkers bringing in
It was
food.
the New York thing where it was like, don't
I thought
like.
it was Delaware.
Delaware. Delaware what?
Delaware had a list.
Delaware Department of
Labor.
Transportation. Go ahead. Delaware had a list.
Jeez. And there was
Zoom
like
in.
a bunch of like rules that you weren't allowed to do. So for example, you weren't allowed to ask a black person if they wanted watermelon or fried chicken.
Yeah.
You couldn't ask a Hispanic person to like do landscaping for your house.
Help with your
And
landscaping.
you couldn't like ask an Asian person to, I don't remember what the Asian one was.
The three in the article, the third one was, I believe you couldn't ask somebody that was gay if they had tried to get help for that. And then I had given you the whole thing, and it dealt with asking Asian coworkers. Does anybody remember? What's that?
Or the Chinese restaurant.
They could recommend a good Chinese restaurant. There was another one that people really chuckled about.
The Latin one?
If they were the IT person, this kind of a thing. Take a look at some of these and think back to these, because these are political correctness pieces. And when I had talked to y'all, if you remember, about this idea of the fried chicken, a lot of people were like, my God, fried chicken, I mean, it's good. I mean, what's wrong with offering fried chicken? I would be upset if you had fried chicken and you didn't offer it to me. And then you see the clip and it's like, wow, is that really what happened to Tiger? Because if this can happen to him, imagine how it happens to regular people. And this was before he was even a big shot, but he was a medium shot. Joe Biden, you remember what Joe Biden said?
He called
Oh,
Barack
yeah.
Obama articulate. He said that he speaks very.
And that's such an awful thing to say to somebody. Wow, you speak so well. What was the problem?
It was an issue because of the stereotype of like black people not speaking like properly, and so for him to call Barack Obama articulate, it came off as like racist or stereotypical.
It did. He not only did he say articulate, what else did he say?
He said clean.
Clean! Yeah, a number of y'all, when we were talking about the roommate on the Facebook ad, or pardon me, the Craigslist ad, y'all said, I want a clean roommate. And then I'm like, yeah, racist. No, I didn't really think that. But if you remember, Joe Biden said, he's this good-looking, articulate, he's clean. Man, this is a fairy book. It's a story book. You know, and you get the idea. He wasn't salty like Fuzzy was. He was trying to say nice things, but he fell into a number of stereotypes without meaning to. He survived to become vice president, but you get the idea. And this was another one. You're not supposed to say articulate. And if you remember, we talked about this within the context of Spanish-speaking folk as well. Because I asked, you know, would people be comfortable if somebody automatically came up and spoke Spanish to you because of the way that you looked, and there was a mixed bag on that. We talked about how maybe grandmothers that are Spanish speakers, in fact, judge their grandkids that live here a little more harshly if they predominantly speak English. We talked about a number of these things. So there are weird rules, and sometimes it might be okay, but sometimes it's offensive, but it's the same thing. You're making you're judging the book by its cover, the judgment that you're making. Seinfeld and the Native Americans, this dealt with, if you remember, asking about the Chinese restaurant, and the mailman got very upset. I could see asking a mailman about the area, but asking the Chinese mailman where the Chinese restaurant was. And if you remember the words in that, reservation, we smoke 'em peace pipe, you remember that from the video? Scalper, I mean, there were a number of things in there, and some of these words really might not be bad, but it's also the idea that you're playing to a stereotype, and the trick is, it's not what you think is okay, or what the group thinks is okay, but it's what each individual person thinks. Jimmy, I think I saw you flinch as we were going through this.
No,
You're good?
yeah.
And then Selma, we talked about the voting rights test, and I included the Selma clip in there. These might be things that you can work into some bigger answers. But pay good attention to that voting rights video, because there's probably more information in there than we went over. And the more that you know about that, especially if you drop a court case or an amendment into some of those answers that are mentioned in the video, that would be pretty impressive. Looking at articles, and I'll go back on this because we've kind of been overlapping a little bit. But we talked about these political correctness articles. I believe we talked about Little People of America. What was the word that they were concerned about?
Midget.
The M word, and they compared it to the N word. And to be honest with you, people got a little bit miffed about that sometimes, because I've never heard of the lynching of little people or the enslavement of little people, but this was something that they felt pretty strongly about. If you remember, we talked about height in this. If you remember, we talked, what was it? For every extra inch, it's about how much money?
$10,000 a year.
$10,000 a year for every extra inch?
That's what you said.
I don't think it was $10,000 a year.
Maybe 1,000.
I think it was $800 an inch. Now make sure that that's in there. But we talked about tall folks. We talked about older folks, right? What was the offense for the older folks? DOA. So what state was this? Anybody? What state was it?
Iowa.
Iowa. And it was what were they changing the name of?
Department of Age. No, it would change to Department of Aging.
They were changing the Department of Elder Affairs to the Department of Aging, which is abbreviated as DOA, which means what? Dead on arrival, and older folks in Iowa did not take kindly to that. This is another example of group identification. So we talked about the older folks. We talked about the little people. Remember the Christian example?
The roommate.
The roommate. What'd the woman do?
She asked for a Christian roommate when she was looking for them, and she got shut down because they said she was discriminating on the
Said it was discriminating, and some of y'all got a little bit upset about the idea. If you remember, oh, well, this is her private home, or this is her apartment, or whatever. Well, when you open it up to rent, you're opening it up to the public, and by doing this, then in fact you're discriminating. They told her she needed some training, and I had mentioned to you that discrimination like this happens all the time. You can judge somebody based on their religion, but don't write it down, because as soon as you write it down, that's when questions are going to come about. And this does actually happen. I'm trying to think. I think there's, the words. Do you remember the words? What was the word? Oh God, it was, dang it, let me pull it up. But it was the words, and they were banning words in what state? Did you say Tennessee?
Dinosaur
it's
and
dancing.
Dancing, she said.
It's in New York.
Dancing was one of the words. That's not it. That's not it. That's it. Undesirable words. That's the one that I was looking for. They wanted to ban undesirable words. I heard dinosaur. I heard dancing. I heard Halloween. Junk food. There was one more that we had talked about. Dancing dinosaur.
Birthday.
Birthday was another one. And to be honest with you, they're basically saying these are undesirable or objectionable words. If you've got to have a reading comprehension passage and you read this but you're offended by the words, then you're not going to do as well on the test. That's what they were trying to do with this. NBA dress code. Oh, this was fun. Do you remember the NBA dress code?
Yeah.
What was up with the NBA dress code?
Racist.
Explain.
It was basically like the stereotypical gangster look that a lot of black people have.
Oh God, the stereotypical gangster look, he says. Gangster! Well, what was the actual dress code? Because they said that you needed to be business casual, right?
Yeah.
But they also said other things. What did they say?
They were like, no do-rags and gold
No
chains.
do-rags!
No gold chains.
No, just no
With-
gold.
It was some really specific thing like that were weighed
Oh,
about
no
the size of a
baby.
baby or something.
No gold chains with gaudy pendants of the approximate size and weight of a small child. Look that over. They made mention in there of do-rags, the wife-beater t-shirts, rumpled sweats, shade glasses indoors, hats, thank you, cocked to the side kind of a thing. Take a look at that. And what was the problem with the dress code?
They told them what not to wear, but not what to wear.
If they would have told them what to wear, then it would have been far less controversial. But by telling them what not to wear, there were a number of black players in the NBA that said, look it, man, you're kind of attacking our style, our swag. This is how we young black males dress. This is discriminatory. There are a lot of white players, foreign players that are not going to dress this way. You're targeting us. And technically speaking, they were probably right about this. Why did it not end up in a lawsuit?
Did they back down?
No,
Oh,
I
they
think
didn't. They didn't back. There was something more to it than backing down. I had mentioned to y'all that. Go ahead.
Wasn't it like you're at work and you sign like a contract or something like that?
That was what the league was saying. You're at work. You signed a contract. We have the authority to do this. And a lot of people in all the classes felt really comfortable with being presentable. And remember, this wasn't just being presentable on the court, but it was official team business.
Yeah.
Pre-game, post-game, interviews, stuff like this. And y'all, when I had asked you if you played a sport or if it was just soccer, y'all said that y'all had to dress certain ways. Do you remember that? On game day, for example. Valeria, I believe I had seen your hand.
Oh yeah.
How did they resolve it?
They paid them extra.
Who did?
I don't know.
They actually got deals with clothing manufacturers, remember? And so since they were getting paid to do this, Marcus Camby, do you remember what he made and what he said he wanted when they came up with this dress code thing? Marcus Camby made $8 million a year. And he said, if you want us to have a dress code, give us a clothing allowance. Well, the NBA didn't, but clothing manufacturers did. And now these post-game news conferences are oftentimes really style statements. They're having a lot more fun with this than when it looked like they were being forced to do this and have to dress a certain way. And I will add the clip from Allen Iverson, and I will add the clip from Chris Paul. Iverson was pre-NBA dress code. Chris Paul was afterwards. It probably wouldn't hurt to address that. Regina Benjamin. Oh, shame on y'all. Who was Regina Benjamin?
Oh, she was a surgeon. Yeah.
Surgeon General appointed by Barack. And what was the problem with Regina Benjamin?
Oh,
She was like,
She
yeah.
looked
She was
noticeably
overweight, right?
overweight.
She was visibly, actually, according to the article, she was visibly obese. And if you remember the article, and I don't know that anybody read this off, but the article said the Republicans leading the anti-fat brigade had said that if in fact she is visibly obese, she is representing the #1 health issue in the country, and in fact she should not be doing this. Was she qualified?
Yes, overly qualified.
Do you remember some of the things that they said?
Youngest person elected to something important.
The youngest person elected. I'm going to send that answer to Joe Stump. I am. I'm going to send him that one. The youngest, not only black woman, first black woman, but the youngest doctor appointed to the American Medical Association. She was somebody that made house calls and actually paid for it when her clients could not pay. I mean, she was somebody, if you're in the 10 o'clock class, she practiced medicine from the chest, if you will. But the idea is that she was qualified as a scholar and she was a good-hearted person. Well, with that being said, she was visibly obese. And if you remember when we had talked about this, I had asked y'all about if you were going to a personal trainer, would you want them to be in shape? If somebody is telling you how to eat or to fight obesity in a certain way, but they appear obese, would you listen? If your doctor told you to quit smoking and you saw your doctor smoking, would the advice mean the same thing? And the Republican argument is, if she's not credible because of her appearance, then in fact, guess what? People aren't going to listen. The other argument is this is pure discrimination. This is another one of these group identities that we're not really thinking about all that much. And the idea is that she's eminently qualified. Let her do her job. Somebody had made mention of drugs. You know, if somebody was a drug user, would you want a drug counselor who was somebody that had previously abused drugs? Because if they had been there, then maybe they would better be able to advise you. Maybe she would better be able to advise on this. And a couple of the classes had said if she got in there and lost weight and demonstrated the issue, then in fact she would be better. Nicole, you're shaking your head. Angry Nicole.